Vlad Circus Descend into Madness is a pixel art point-and-click adventure game with survival horror elements, currently free from Prime Gaming until 31st of July 2024. Vlad Circus feels like an updated version of the old-school original point-and-click games. Games like Monkey Island, but with a more user-friendly interface, less complicated interactions, and no humour at all. This is not a funny game. It deals with grief and mental health issues, so jokes would be wildly out of place or really dark humour, and would also break the tense atmosphere it's trying to build. The game does put up a warning about disturbing scenes, and they could certainly bother some people, so if that might be a problem for you, just give this one a pass. I'll not include any of those sort of scenes in the review, and I'll do my best to not put anything up that spoils the story. Those cutscenes do contribute to the unnerving feeling you get as you progress through the game. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's talk about presentation first. The graphics, as you can see, are pixel art, and are pretty blocky pixel art at that. I know from previous comments on other videos that does put some people off. Fortunately, objects are still identifiable, and because of this sort of updated user interface, you get a pop-up when you're nearby an interactable object. So even if it's not entirely clear from the art what something is, the name of what it is will pop up. What does work with the pixel art is the lighting in the game. It's really well done. Walking around without a light is actually pretty tough. It's really hard to see, and given the nature of the game, is also a pretty bad idea. You can pick up a lantern which sheds some light, kind of enough to be jump scared as something lurches at you out of the darkness. I was actually surprised at the scarcity of music. The majority of the game had none. All you hear is sound effects like the rain or your footsteps or your heartbeat, which does create that eerie feeling of being in a strange mansion or walking around the dark forest surrounding it. For me, it really set the tone of the game well. This is very story-led, so let me give you a quick summary of the setup for the game. No spoilers for what you're actually going to play. You are Oliver, a clown in 1929 being invited back to your old circus that tragically burnt to the ground a few years back. That event caused you to suffer pretty severe mental illness, and in turn had you committed to an asylum. You meet up with your old circus companions in the owner of the circus's big mansion, and as you progress through the story you have to solve some mysteries and deal with issues that arise. You revisit events from your time in the circus, partly by talking to your companions, but also, and quite nicely, by having memories triggered by old photographs where you effectively enter that memory and watch it play out. Gameplay is a bit different from the standard point-and-click adventure games though, because of that horror survival element. There's combat here. When you start a game you can choose between story or challenge difficulty modes. I originally went for challenge, but the combat actually got a bit frustrating for me. You have a stress meter that fills up as you see apparitions which are conjured up by your mental illness. This effectively acts like a health bar. If something hits you, they add a big chunk of stress, as does just being around them. Because it's stress and not health, you don't actually die when the meter fills up. You faint and wake up elsewhere. Maybe you lose a bit of ammunition, but other than that, there's no real penalty. There is a hidden stamina meter that you can't see, obviously, that runs out as you run and as you swing weapons. On challenge mode, a couple of swings with a melee weapon will completely drain it. Run out and your character stops for a couple of seconds to catch their breath, which is a bad idea if you're surrounded by monsters. If you play story mode, the stamina cost for swinging is taken away. There's no reduction in enemies, but you can effectively stun lock an enemy if you get lined up with them, because you never have to stop swinging. Obviously that's less of an issue when you get a ranged weapon. The issue there becomes having enough ammo. Personally, I found running away is by far the better choice, just avoiding them completely, because even though some creatures drop ammo when you shoot them, and more so if you've got a particular item, if you're not fighting them, you're not using ammo anyway, so who cares? Outside of the combat, it follows the standard routine of this kind of game. You get a task set for you, which you can view via your journal, and you need to find objects and use them with the right interactable element on the screen to complete the tasks. You don't get a lot of clues, which, to be honest, I struggled with. I got stuck a couple of times and needed to go to a walkthrough video. My tip, generic tip, is to remember to talk to everyone if you get stuck and don't know what to do. Make sure you revisit the memories in those pictures that I mentioned if you get stuck. Sometimes you need to have viewed that to be able to find the next item to progress. And remember that the tonic that you're given removes hallucinations that block the way. If you remember all of those things and do that, you should be fine. Using an object is easy. Stand in front of the interactable element on the screen, open your inventory, select the item and use it with the element on the screen. It tells you if it works or not, so there's no way you can waste something in the wrong place. You do have a very limited number of inventory slots though, because you basically have to have your diary, your rosary, which is basically your heal, you stop and pray and your stress reduces, and you have your lantern, which sheds light. Here's another survival element of the game. You have to go to one of two locations and refill the lantern, or you're left in the dark. Same goes with a knife that you pick up early in the game as a melee weapon. It gets dull and you need to find somewhere to sharpen it, which is a task in itself, in fact. This means you don't have many inventory slots spare really, especially when you've picked up a ranged weapon. I found myself having to dump items pretty regularly to make room for the new thing I wanted to pick up. However, it wasn't generally too much of a problem because there were a number of items that I still had in my inventory that I actually never used ever again. And it wasn't too hard to figure out what they were. Most items disappear once you use them, but there are a few that stick around, so they're the ones that you can just drop. There is a lot of backtracking involved when solving the tasks, and I'm not the biggest fan of that at all. Even with this backtracking, it's a surprisingly short game. It took me, with the help of a walkthrough a couple of times, 5.5 hours to complete, because I got stuck a lot and spent a good half an hour at least just wandering around, not knowing what to do next. The walkthrough I watched took about 2.25 hours. If you're a bit better at these games than me, a run of 3 or 4 hours for the first time you play it wouldn't be unreasonable. When I didn't get stuck, the puzzle aspect of the game was pretty enjoyable. It felt good to piece together where to use what, all made sense, but the amount of backtracking, especially given the fact that you can't run consistently and keep stopping, and the what felt like unnecessary combat, just slowed my progress down and took away some of the enjoyment. I was intrigued to follow the story. Learning all about the characters was, I was going to say fun, but not fun exactly, because they all had pretty harrowing stories. But it was at least interesting. It is a pretty grim story, which fits the survival horror aspects of the game. What's weird though is I like survival games. I've got so many hours in Valheim, I'm not going to tell you how many. But in this game, those were the bits that I really didn't like. As I said, they fit in with the overall feel of the game, but to me they were just a drag on the interesting parts, which was the characters and the well-written story. This is a tricky one to judge, to give a recommendation or not. I equally like and dislike pretty significant parts of this game. Atmosphere, storytelling, great. Combat, amount of backtracking, bad. I enjoyed myself with the puzzles, but swore in frustration at the game a couple of times. I don't know. The themes of traumatic mental illness and the admittedly pixel but graphic violent scenes aren't going to be for everyone. And nor will the survival aspect, so harder to judge, but I did overall enjoy my time with the game. If you're okay with the things I pointed out, I think you will too. Right, that's all from me on this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.